Welcome, Pup Gideon, to the Ask Ezra Intimacy podcast.
Thank you. I'm so
Yeah,
happy to be here.
yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. And we're going to pick your brain about legal matters because you are Pup Gideon Esquire.
Mhm.
But first, what is pup play for you?
Well, before I go any farther, because you just said with the legal, it's basically stamped in my brain since law school is anything I say is my opinion and anything I say isn't to be taken as legal advice. But to go right into pup life, being a pup for me means it is something part of who I am. It's part of my soul, my identity. It's something I carry with me everywhere. It's a sense of spirit and feeling that connection, almost kind of like that primal kind of when you see a pup or you see because there's pet play. When you see a pup, you see that like happiness, you see that like just utter joy
Mm-hmm.
and spirit and kind of just sense of discovery. And it's not that a pup is simplistic. In fact, they're some of the most, intelligent creatures we come into contact with, but it really hits home to what are the most important things in your life, which is knowing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's almost like it's permission to be primal and animalistic.
Yeah, and to be you, just to be
Mm.
whatever it shows just like a puppy. I mean, we always,
I I love that. So pup play gives you permission to be you. So can you help me understand that a little bit? So in what way does this pup play experience give you permission to be more truly yourself?
it aligns with passion. I think with anything I do in life, it
Mm-hmm.
has opened this door of just being passionate for life itself. It's let me be happy and to be whatever emotion, to be okay with accepting like affection, like simple acts of affection, like good boy or aren't you so cute? Things like with when it comes to being a pup.
Mm-hmm.
But then you kind of go into that state of being a pup, it's accepting affection. It just
Mm-hmm.
allows you to accept who you are and accept what you want and to express that and it just being very like simplistic, and I think that often helps when it comes to life because we approach a lot of complex things in our life with such thought rather than make it simplistic. Simplistic does not mean lack of intelligence. It allows me to just be kind of clear.
It's interesting. There's all these social expectations that are put on us, and they all sort of spill over from space to space. And that I think primal play as like a larger catch-all that includes pup play, perhaps. Primal
Mhm,
play really gives us an opportunity to have permission to do
mhm,
things that maybe aren't part of our sense of self already or part of our character. And so if I think of myself as a serious person, maybe I can be a silly pup, and now I have permission to be silly in a way that I would like to be, but it doesn't like match up with my whole cultivated personality,
mhm.
right?
Exactly, and but it is part of something that you bring along. We're the
Mm-hmm.
culmination of all these different things, and I think just like you're saying, I consider myself a serious person, is that you can be silly. You have the permission to be that part of
Mm.
who you are. We're these complex creatures
Yeah.
that walk among us, and we walk among many other complex creatures around us, and yet everybody's inhibiting this sense of life. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something we share with everything that is on this planet is there's life involved.
Yeah. In the end, we are animals, right?
It's true.
And fucking weird ones.
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. And if people want to hear more about pup play, then episode 36 with Kieran Hound is a good
Oh,
place because that was all we are talking about, right?
and she
So,
is truly an embodiment of the spirit of passion and the
mm,
spirit of joy and the spirit of understanding. And the way she
mm-hmm,
approaches individuals in such a loving, kind way while maintaining the boundaries of allowing herself to be happy. It,
Yeah, and so you're in the same community spaces then, or they overlap? Yeah.
yeah,
Wonderful. Fantastic. Okay, so let's get on to the legal mumbo jumbo gobbledygook.
governing.
Um, all right, so there's a lot to think about here. So we are in California.
Mhm,
Most people think of California as particularly liberal, and I
mhm.
think it's often a surprise to find out that many of the things that we do in BDSM are not legal, right?
Yeah. When you mention the not legal aspect, I often think of family law, like it'll be a contentious, let's say, custody fight. And we all have these things about ourselves that are important to ourselves. And if they somehow step outside this heteronormative, cisgendered, binary, religious constraint and continuum, and the other person is your former intimate partner.
Sure, sure.
Mhm.
It's like
Yeah.
a vulnerability almost.
Yeah, and some people are express frightened feeling when,
Mhm, mhm.
because as an attorney, people come to me, I'm often the first person to hear the whole story,
Sure.
and many people are almost afraid to even tell me, and that's why I
Mm,
always say there are sacred boundaries, and one of those privileges is attorney-client privilege. That includes confidentiality, attorney-client, and then workplace products. So, like, when I write notes and
mhm,
we start
mhm.
writing things. So I always say, like, "I'm gonna ask questions, and I'm gonna delve into these things. I want you to communicate to me." And
Sure.
that's often the first time they're hearing about communication in a long time.
So let's back up for a second here. You deal with people in family court, is that right?
Yeah, so I deal with family law issues, and a lot of people think that's just I'm just a divorce attorney. In fact, I consider family law so many different vehicles. So we have child custody, we might have a dissolution of marriage, a divorce with child custody. We may have an after divorce, so a post judgment motion. We might have something all the way, might be domestic violence. That might include kids. Everything from that to even grandparent visitation rights.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
it's a wide, wide variety of things. But um, as your podcast points out, is the intimate nature of our relationships with other people and how they interact with other aspects of the world.
Sure, sure. So two, I think, really important questions are one, I mean, we mentioned, BDSM is at least not explicitly legal. Anybody getting arrested for consensual BDSM activities?
Not to my knowledge when it comes to consensual BDSM, but it has come up in law when it comes to what the law and previous case law has deemed quote unquote deviant, or the
Mm,
lifestyle, words that can make me cringe and just go, oh, really, that choice? Because when we're talking about BDSM, there's a lot of intersection with different gender identities,
mhm, mhm.
gender orientation, sexual orientation, gender expression, and even case law before these statutes when it comes to custody of children did address you can't use the fact that your child will be around a gay person as a reason to take custody.
Yeah, and
Recent.
so and that is a relatively recent development, right? I mean, that wasn't the case in the 50s, I'm sure.
Well, actually, the statutes, California Family Code of
Mhm,
explicitly say gender identity, sexual orientation of your partner or your
mhm.
family or your friends can't be used as a factor. But even before then, decades before then, they were, as more and more people come out as being, let's say, heterosexual or not heterosexual, something other than heterosexual.
Pup Gideon, I have a confession to make. I'm just kidding.
But these things, even before marriage equality, were
Yeah.
addressed. You can't be using things another parent has an opinion about.
Mm,
Or and that goes into religion. That goes into kind of setting the parameters down and saying, okay, we're not bringing in your dirty laundry for the sake of a child
sure,
and
sure,
using
sure.
a
That's
child.
okay. So people aren't really getting arrested for BDSM. That's great to hear. What about, are people losing their kids over their BDSM practice?
Not to my knowledge, but the issue though is while we have the law of you can't factor it in, it's unless there's a detriment. If somebody's going to bring up something, talk to me about it because I'm going to fight hard with the law. But family law judges do have a lot of say when it comes to their ideas and what's in the best interest of the child. And that's always been my concern. So, although I don't see people, thank God, BDSM, you're awful. I'm always prepared to be like, well, Your Honor, we know what BDSM is? Because I'm here to gladly inform the court what it really is. And it's always about making sure you're talking to those people who are within the BDSM community and going, I got your back. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to make sure it's always CYA, cover your ass. It's always like we're gonna have A, B, C, D, and E. Like what could he
Yeah,
say
yeah.
pull? So that way I'm like, you know what, Your Honor, let's talk about it. So and so wants to bring it up.
So what constitutes detriment to a child in terms of BDSM? Because you could imagine like a collaring ceremony, which is where like let's say a total power exchange relationship. It's like a marriage, but it's more about that particular, power dynamic. It can look like a marriage, right? And so is being exposed to that as a child considered detriment to the child just because it's counterculture?
I would argue if I were in court, no, it's absolutely not detrimental. Let's be honest, it's not affecting the health, the safety, or the well being of a child. No
Mm-hmm.
one, show me the detriment. Where's the consequences here? Would go, well, we're getting into so murky of water. This isn't a fireside chat. This is a court of law, and
Yeah.
when you go through the process of family law, lawyers, judges, and people's idea of what family law and that area of the law looks like completely changes.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so what might constitute, I mean, have you seen anything that did constitute detriment to the child with regard to, let's call it deviant behavior?
I've seen where, well, when it comes to like deviant behavior, even when it comes to like, let's say, uh, marijuana, or
Mm,
it comes to something what a lot of the time is you have to look at what's are we looking at societally deviant behavior, or are we looking
mm-hmm.
at what the parent is deeming deviant behavior? And
Yeah.
my concern is push that out, let's look at the detriment, because ideas of what deviant behavior, what's the definition of,
Yeah.
of deviant behavior? I haven't seen that, but people do try to pull people's dirty laundry.
People are pretty good about holding boundaries around their kids.
Yes, and I think that people are kinky when it comes to those things. People who are kinky, people who are polyamorous, people who are into what society doesn't deem as this traditional marriage. Those people have children too, or interacting with children. They may be aunts, uncles, cousins. So yeah, the parents, if you're looking out for the best interest of your children, it's all
Mm-hmm.
boundaries.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, what is something, you mentioned traditional marriage in quotes. So, what do you see as like a trend that's moving forward, or something that maybe doesn't match up with people's expectations in terms of the bounds of what people think marriage is, or or what it's becoming.
I think a lot of it has to do with the word traditional.
Mhm.
It's we can where are we going, biblical times? Are we going different areas of the world? My tradition, if I were, let's say, in a different area of the world, maybe a different religion, a different time period, traditional has changed rapidly. So
Mhm.
this concept of like traditional marriage was not including interracial couples. We had to have a Supreme Court case, Loving, to change that. We had to change this idea of traditional marriage with Obergefell, with same-sex couples.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're constantly evolving this concept of traditional marriage, or what is traditional, or if we should even be using that word, because by whose tradition? So what
Yeah.
I see a lot of things behind the curtain. Like when I pull the curtain and you see like the Wizard of Oz is this little guy,
Mhm.
and he gets in a hot air balloon, whatever. But the concept of traditional marriage, or what marriage really looks like, marriage can be real messy. Or
Mhm.
marriage can be real wide variety. I think one of the things we really need to do is we need to pull back that. I think it's really an advertisement. I think it's really society trying to pigeonhole people because it's easier to control the people they view as deviants if I
Mm.
paint the picture of this is what it is. And we see advertisements every single day. The advertisements have changed. You've seen interracial couples when
Mhm.
you see that.
Mhm.
You say interracial children. Like you see, biracial children. You see same-sex couples. That was not 1950 where
Mhm.
it's just
Mhm.
white. Oh, and then of course she's opening an oven, and there's nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home mom. And there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with whatever your marriage looks like, but just stop taking a dump on what other people's marriages look like.
I like this concept that we see with people who are pushing traditional marriage, as if their marriage is at risk because somebody else is doing it differently.
Mhm.
Like, it's so silly. Like,
And
just take care
and
of yourself, honey.
Yeah, and when you look past it, what someone may view is, this is the home and these are the children, and then I'm getting something into court and I'm like, whoa, what happens behind that closed doors, for good or for bad, is nowhere close to whatever the hell you were trying to push.
Yeah, the narrative they're trying to create, sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So, what about people who have never had a divorce and their sort of approach to other people who are going through a divorce?
I find, and this goes to all different areas of family law, and especially with divorce, is I find whenever people, how you ever walk in and you hear something about something that you've experienced or you deal with, or regardless, and
Mhm.
somebody says something that is so ignorant, it's not so much they're a bad person, or it's because society pumps this view of,
Mm.
of divorce, such as everybody's getting divorced. They don't want to deal with the marriage, so they get a divorce. Everybody who comes into my office is like, just afraid, like, I've tried everything. I'm totally up Shit's Creek without a paddle. I find
Mm.
it completely ignorant and completely lacking of empathy
You
to
like divorce
anybody.
is the easy thing to do, right?
I have seen people come in that, are the like, oh, the macho man, how society, comes in, oh, everything's put together. And I've seen people just bawling. And it's not like, oh, a man, I see a person bawling.
Mhm.
Somebody
Mhm.
that's going, I've done these things. And so when someone's going through a divorce, I'm like, you have no idea, which is the whole aspect of sit in a courtroom. and see what a custody hearing looks like and see the parents' reaction. See what a divorce looks like. Like many people don't understand. You could go on California courts and you can look up what the steps of a divorce are. It's not some whatever quickie thing. And you talk to anybody that's gone through a divorce. I hear that and I get angry because I've seen people going through a divorce, good or bad.
Yeah.
And I go, that is so mean to that person. That hurts because I'm like, I see what hurt
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah. I hear you. I will say that I'm getting better at getting divorced because I had two of them and the second one was
Yeah.
cakewalk.
Yeah.
We had nothing to split up. I had a prenup. It was bye bye.
Yeah, and isn't it always the way that when people, people get a prenup and it's,
Yeah.
well, you got a prenup, you must not trust the marriage. What's the first thing people say when, like, let's say maybe there's some assets in there? Oh, you weren't smart, you didn't get a prenup.
Uh-huh.
I
Sure,
guess
sure. Well, I
stupid.
mean, California is a community property state, right? And I had a
Yes.
total power exchange relationship,
Hmm.
and they came to me with nothing.
Hmm.
I'm gonna give them the house for hanging around for 2 years. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
bye.
Yeah,
Hope
and
you
I
kept your
mean,
suitcases.
I know. It's like, let's understand we're coming into these things, and when you approach a prenup, it's like, you may come around and you may get stuff,
Yeah.
and the whole aspect is, I don't want this to turn into I want us to have some guideline through what can be a shit show to because I care about you that much, because I'm
Hmm.
thinking ahead. I don't want to lose the opportunity that we can be friends down the line, or
Yeah.
opportunity that we don't look at each other with hate in our eyes.
Mm-mm.
I've seen people look at each other and I'm like, okay, you're coming with me because, like, you got to get the hell out of this
Yeah.
courthouse.
Well, I mean, and I don't want to brag, but I've been divorced twice and they both like gone really well. The first time we had assets
Mhm,
and we had a house and we had a child
mhm,
and we both made the commitment that the child is the number one priority and
mhm,
that we're going to split it custody right down the middle. We're going to all the decisions that we make are going to be to have the best possible life for our child who we love. And, it sucked. It always sucks. Like I always say, I had the best divorce, but it still sucks when you're going through it. And then the second one, we didn't have anything to split up, and I had the prenup, so we're just, you know,
mhm.
bit bap boom, done. And I always say, you give condolences to somebody who's in a divorce, but then you give congratulations to somebody who's finished a divorce.
Yes, I imagine, yes, at the end when, because a lot of the times you'll go through a trial, or sometimes maybe there's some motions along the way, or
Mhm.
maybe, I think with attorneys that are just litigation happy, they don't understand the that's more of like an ego trip. Like, I'm ready to litigate, trust me, but I'm also willing to listen. And the fact is, it sucks, like you were saying, but it can suck less, a lot less, because you're putting the focus on the best interest of the child and realizing we have a responsibility together. We're not going, like, I'm gonna see you. Like, we're
Mhm.
not like dead to each other. We have a child.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and we have these memories and stuff like that. But yeah, with the signing, it's like, congratulations.
Yeah, yeah, pop the champagne.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
so yeah, so like I said, I'm just an expert at getting divorced. But what does it look like when it goes wrong? How can it get ugly?
It can get really, really bad. I've gone into court. The interesting with family law is you'll go into, I think the past 2 weeks, like business days, I was in court for like 7 out of 10 of them. So they were all these different varieties. So, like custody, I've seen people crying, I've seen people accusing, and I'm just sitting there just going, Your Honor, may I speak? This is this. We're here about the focus of the child. But I've seen people screaming in court, yelling in court, you're a bad mom, you're a bad dad, you're a danger to the children, you never cared, I should have custody, I should have all these things, some really dark accusations being thrown around. And
Mm,
of course, you have to take these like evidence-based because again, we're all there for the best interest of the child. I'm there to advocate my clients' best interest, and I've seen it where it gets really bad. You're not like a therapist, but you're just like, oh, okay, let's talk about it. Let's pull back a little bit.
mhm.
I'm going to be like, look, I'm not scared of you to the client. I'm going to tell you what I think. You're paying me for my legal mind, not for me to blow smoke up your ass.
That's
I'm,
extra charge.
yes, that's extra charge. There's a sticker
You got
that
to come to the bar for that.
yes. It's like, I'm not here to kiss your ass, I'm here to save it.
Yeah.
So I have to, that you do have to approach the emotion of those individuals. So I
Yeah.
see it brings out a lot of pain, and where that pain goes can determine a lot of different things.
What about non-monogamous families? Have you ever had like a custody battle between 3 people or 4 people or something like that?
I haven't, but I've dealt with situations where there might be some guardians involved
Mm-hmm.
in the situation. There might be a different kind of setup of what we're trying to achieve. The parties look different, but there have been ones where it's not so much a non-monogamous relationship, other than the fact that the setups are totally different.
Well, have you heard about, I mean, I know that infidelity can be like a cause for divorce, and it can be a detrimental to one's standing within the divorce. Has there ever been, to your knowledge, a situation where the marriage was open or non-monogamous, and then one of the people like framed it as infidelity so that they could benefit?
Yeah, I can't speak to specifics, but there have been cases where there are different setups
Hmm.
and different agreements. And when you note on infidelity, I think that really hits to every single different type of relationship structure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Infidelity is not just some physical cheating thing. Infidelity is where you have made an agreement, a vow, if you will, whether that's in front of an altar, whether that's a marriage thing, whatever, that structure, there is a dedication, there's an agreement. And when you violate someone's trust and there hasn't been, it could be money. That's the issue. It could
Mm-hmm.
be you did something behind my back. I trusted you, and it's really awful. Like it's just a thing that we had made these agreements and you violated it. So
Mm-hmm.
infidelity can be really across the board, and it could be in any type of relationship, because it's a relationship is about these intimate agreements and these intimate things and connections. We're connected through
Mm-hmm.
agreements. And
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I mean, I was in a non-monogamous relationship that involved infidelity, and it wasn't what you would traditionally think of as infidelity. It was about not honoring the agreements that we had. It was about not honoring what we had decided together. And the frustrating thing for me is that we always could have had that conversation and renegotiated, right? But instead, it was, yeah. Anyway, enough about me. One thing I wanted to ask at the beginning of the conversation when we were talking about sort of the legality of BDSM, I know that people like to do contracts
Mhm.
I tend to try to call them agreements because I know they don't hold as much water as
Mhm.
you might think if you call them a contract. But
Mhm.
what is the significance of a BDSM contract in court, if anything?
Any evidence is a showing, because remember, we're going into court
Hmm.
and it's an evidence-based fact. The judge hasn't been there. You really are telling a story of what's going on. And when
Hmm.
you have some sort of an agreement, let's say with, let's say BDSM, you had some sort of an understanding. It shows like, this is where I'm coming from. This is the stage I sat down. So even though we might not even be dealing with a contract, because there's some things you can't contract to, like even if you agree, let's say the two parties agree, we're going to raise our kids Jewish, and then the judge is like, I can't enforce that. It really depends on what you're there for. Like if
Hmm.
it's an accusation
Yeah.
of abuse or something like that, and they could say, well, I've never been in this, this type of setup, and you go, well, we negotiated these things. And it
Hmm.
also goes to someone's character and someone's position, is saying like, I care enough about this person to set up these agreements. So
Hmm.
it's not so much, I would say, enforcement of a contract as evidence of the history in the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I have heard that like a BDSM contract is not going to protect you at all in a criminal case. It could be beneficial in a civil case
Mhm.
where, one person is saying like, "Oh, I didn't agree to this."
It depends, let's say, if it involves sex or something like that. And it also depends on the rules of evidence. It also depends on these things and what you're using it for.
Hmm.
Because what your motivation is, judges are like, do not kick this in here for this reason. You're not going to use improper character evidence. But if you're using, there might be a way to use something as, let's say, impeachment evidence of somebody who's saying, well, I never did this, this, and this, and they're making all these statements, that maybe there's a way to use that evidence through looking at the evidence code, which is always, I don't know, I'm just a nerd with stuff. I'm just like,
Hmm.
how can I get this through here? Like, I'm just like, how can I go, oh, damn, well, there's got to be some other way. And then I'm like
Hmm.
looking through and going, oh, this law just came down and it allows this. I can see if that, you got to be creative. But it goes also to, if it's admissible, it goes to, like we said, a person's character.
Well, wonderful. I appreciate your insight and your taking the time to shed some light on some things here.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Is there any way that you'd like people to reach out and get a hold of you if they had some additional questions or
I am on Twitter, until that old burns to the ground. Gideon the Law Pup. So Gideon, Gideon, the Law, Law, Pup, Pup.
I have this vision of somebody at a leather bar and you're running around on all fours in a pup hood and goes, "That's my lawyer."
That's, he's not on retainer, he's on leash.